Okay, hello everyone and welcome. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm glad you could join us for this webinar on gas, mini-grids, and distributed renewable energy, the foreseeable future of Nigeria's energy needs. Access to power for all Nigerians by 2030 is the motivation behind the Vision 30-30-30 goal, which projects to generate 30 gigawatts of electricity in 10 years from now, with 30% of that from renewable sources. Reaching that goal is a daunting task and one that will tremendously improve our socioeconomic development. The drive to get to that future requires a mix of different sources of power generation, including gas, mini-grids, and renewable energy. Nigeria's abundant gas reserves, much of which is being flared currently, can be deployed to develop our industrial capacity and provide clean energy for Nigerians. It is projected that the potential impact on Nigeria from the utilization of flared gas includes creation of about 300,000 jobs, elimination of 20 million tons of CO2 emissions, access to clean energy for 6 million households, and 2.5 gigawatts of power generation. The use of off-grid and interconnected mini-grids have been deployed in many parts of the world to improve access to reliable power supply, and this can be achieved using distributed renewable energy. To discuss the relevance and opportunities available to us in Nigeria using the various strategies mentioned in achieving our access to power for all, there are 4 distinguished panelists with enviable profiles that we have today. My name is Afolabi Davidson of Energy Training Center, and I'll be your moderator for this webinar. I hope everyone can hear me. I think there's some echo going on. My technical partner, David, who's working behind the scenes, can help us to reduce the effect of the echo. Okay, moving along. First, we'll go over a few housekeeping rules. And the first point I want to share is that a recording of today's webinar will be available after the live discussions, which you can access on our website at etc.ng. And secondly, to ask our panelists questions, you can type your question by using the Q&A icon available to you at the bottom of your screen. And we also encourage you to share your key light bulb moments that you get during the webinar on your social media handles using the hashtag #ETCPowerWebinar. For those of you joining us, or you're just joining us rather, welcome. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our guest panelists in no particular order. First is Dr. Joy Ogaji. Dr. Joy holds a first degree in law from the Rivers State University of Science and Technology, a bachelor's degree in law from the Nigerian Law School, a master's degree in environmental law from De Montfort University in Leicester, UK, and her PhD from Warwick University, UK, focused on the viability of applying alternative dispute resolution processes in the oil and gas sector in Nigeria. She's a Nigerian-British professional with over 16 years of progressive managerial experience in various aspects of commercial corporate law, such as oil and gas, power, energy, property, and regulatory matters. Her core competence covers a wide variety of disciplines, spanning many years of public and private sector experience, with 10 years in senior management positions. Dr. Ogaji is currently the pioneer executive secretary of the Association of Power Generation Companies in Nigeria. And next, we have Kolawole Akinboye. Kolawole works as the Vice President Projects for Rensource Energy, a leading renewable energy company in Nigeria. And prior to this, he has worked in various roles at companies like Intercontinental Bank, MTN Nigeria, Flour Mills of Nigeria, and Total Nigeria. He studied electrical engineering from the University of Ilorin and has an MBA from the Lagos Business School. He's a member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers and a project management professional from the Project Management Institute. And then we have Mr. Segun Adaju, who is the Chief Energizing Officer, Consistent Energy Limited, which is a leading rooftop solar company in Nigeria that is driving a solar revolution with its finance and leasing schemes through the rent-to-own business model branded Solar Direct. He's a graduate of the University of Lagos with BSc Economics and MBA degrees. He has also attended executive programs of leading institutions such as Harvard Business School, MIT Sloan School of Management, Frankfurt School of Management, Renewables Academy, Berlin, and Lagos Business School, amongst others. He belongs to several professional associations, including Institute of Directors, Academy for Entrepreneurial Studies, Alliance for Rural Electrification, African Renewable Energy Alliance, Power for All, Society for Corporate Governance, etc. Segun is the president of Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria and recently elected as chairman of the task force on energy of D8, that is developing countries comprising of Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Turkey. And then we have Dr. Abubakar Abbas. Dr. Abbas is a chartered engineer with Engineering Council UK under the Institution of Gas Engineers and Managers in the UK. He's a PhD graduate in gas engineering, a fellow of Higher Education Academy with over 15 years combined industrial and academic experience. Abubakar is a leading international research collaboration with the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and also with the knowledge transfer partnerships in different areas of energy transition, and working with REAN Research and Enterprise in developing collaborative industry, academia, process, digital teaching and learning using ProMax software for process engineering. Dr. Abubakar has graduated 4 PhD students in different fields of gas and petroleum engineering. And he has also published several high-impact journal papers. He is currently program leader, MSc Petroleum and Gas Engineering at the University of Salford, Manchester, UK, and a consultant in many gas engineering projects across the globe. Wow, that's a mouthful. So as you can see, all of our guest panelists today have impressive and enviable profiles. To start off our discussions, I'd like to ask Dr. Abbas to lead off by sharing his thoughts on the topic, Transportation Network Code in Nigeria, the future of gas and electricity supply. Dr. Abbas, are you ready for us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, are you projecting your slides?
Yes, I'm going to share now.
Okay. You'll get access to share your screen so we can see your slides.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Abbas, I can see your slides.
Okay, that is fine. Thank you very much, everyone. My name is Abubakar Abbas. I'm going to talk briefly today on future of gas and electricity supply in Nigeria and how the two industries are interwoven. The highlight of the presentation involves four important we'll first of all go through the dependency of electricity supply on gas market. And the reason for this is simply because electricity generation in Nigeria has all been linked to shortage of gas supply. So all the issues and problems we face is either related to insufficient gas, vandalization, or gas supply security. The second aspect, we'll go through the regulation. Why do we have to regulate the gas industry? And what do we mean to achieve by regulating the gas industry in order to be a gas-based economy? Then the third aspect, the recently published network code in Nigeria, which is an important framework developed under the Federal Ministry of Petroleum Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources and the Department of Petroleum Resources in order to transform gas sector into a viable sector that can solve our energy problems. Then we go through the electricity and market future expectation. I will first of all take you a brief highlight on what a natural gas is. Natural gas as it stands contains molecules of hydrocarbons ranging from lower to higher ones, but principally they can come in 4 or 5 forms. The LNG.
Dr. Abbas, sorry for interrupting. Could you put your slides in presentation mode?
Okay.
Please?
Okay.
You can go on if you're not able to do
Okay.
that now. Just
okay, that is fine. I just want to make sure that, is it on now?
not yet.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. So just as a highlight, natural gas involves 4 to 5 important components, which we normally call as natural gas. So we can have it as natural gas, liquefied natural gas, compressed natural gas, or it can come in form of LPG. Both of those components we'll be able to see have a significant benefit compared to the current petrol and diesel we are using in terms of our transportation shown on the right-hand side, as well as in terms of power generation. Now, people most times ask, what is the dependency of gas price or viability of gas in terms of oil price? So what I'm just going to share here is to see the projected increase in oil price from the recent last 2 days agreement of OPEC and non-OPEC, or the OPEC plus Russia, to be able to stabilize oil market by cutting 9.5 million barrels. We can see that the price has shot up to around $34 a barrel as of today, meaning as at $30 a barrel, natural gas for power generation is going to cost $3 to $6 per million BTU, compared to diesel 7.7 and LPG 8.8. That simply means natural gas remains the most viable option even at the lowest oil price of today. Talk less of other possible price of $45, $60 a barrel in the long-term scenario. So now let us, having seen what a gas is, let us first through at the regulation. Why do we have to regulate gas industry? The regulation of gas industry is coming at a time when we are facing a number of challenges in the gas industry. Some of the challenges involved, especially for the gas industry, we have limited infrastructure for gas supply. We don't have enough transmission and distribution lines, metering facilities, gas detection, and other safety issues. We can see everyday issues related to gas leakage, which unfortunately causes a lot of fire incidents and damages, as well as, more seriously, loss of life. Equally, we can see another problem in terms of price parity. At the moment, gas sold outside Nigeria cost higher than gas sold in the country. So for that reason, a lot of companies, especially the IOCs, are motivated to export instead of domestic supply obligation. That is another challenge. We also have non-payment of debt and revenues, which affect the operation and efficiency of those companies working in the gas sector. There are monopoly issues which avoid new entrants to come in. There are issues of transparency, as well as the climate change, which Mr. Apolabi has already mentioned from the beginning. But equally, the power sector is sharing similar problem to that of gas. We don't have adequate transmission and distribution infrastructure, which is similar to lack of transmission and distribution gas systems. We don't have a credit-worthy payment system, so there are a lot of debt issue and inability to get that money back because there are no improvement. We can see a lot of issues related to competition and market rules, which require enforcement. And we can see the target of 30-30-30, generating 30,000 megawatt, using 30% renewables by 2030. All these are the motivators that help government to come up with a plan to deliver the expectation. And that expectation is coming in terms of gas network code. Recently, it was launched in February 2020 by the Minister of Petroleum. And now let us see how does the gas regulation happens under the network code. So in the current market structure we are expected to have, even
Dr.
though—
Abbas, please go ahead and change your slides.
Okay.
Move your slides to the next. We're not sure if you're still on slide 3.
Okay. Okay. Okay, yeah, so this is my slide now.
What slide number are you on now?
Yeah, I'm on slide number 5.
Okay, please move your cursor to number 5 so we can see your slides.
Okay, can you see it now?
It's not changing.
Okay, sorry.
So our participants are not seeing your slides that you are.
Okay. Okay. It's coming up now in a minute. Okay, I just want to confirm if it is visible now.
Okay, yeah, you're on slide 5 now.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, so what we are simply looking at is, at the current moment, we have a dominant supplier of gas, who are the IOCs and NPGC. We have a dominant transporter of gas, who is the NGC, Nigerian Gas Company. And we have the IPP, the NIPP, and various commercial and industrial plus domestic customers in this market. The agreements are done only based on GPSA, which is restrictive to a particular arrangement, which may not be visible to everybody or may not be accessible to everybody. So for that, the government launched the network code, and this is now the current intended structure for the network code to happen. So that simply means from the supply for IOCs to see the profitability of gas supply in and out of the country. So that simply means it is going to be cheaper for IOCs to meet their domestic supply obligation, make more profit compared to export. That is one. The second aspect, we are introducing a lot of players, producers, suppliers, storage, regulators, shippers, traders, as well as transporter. So what we end up with, we can see that a supplier is the main contact which the IPP or the gas user has as a supplier of gas. The supplier then mandate a shipper to get a gas. Okay, the supplier will be able to source a gas from the producers, and then you can now use a shipper to get your gas from point A to point B. And that is done through a transporter who are currently NGC. And the expectation is a lot of transporters, storers, and other shippers are expected to come on board. So that is the existing structure, but we are going to see much more of it at a later stage. Now, the next aspect is if that structure happened to work the way we expect the structure to work, now, what is the difference between the existing structure and the structure we are expected to have under the network code? So the future structure identify that for you to supply a gas for the next day, which is tomorrow, you first of all need
to move to the next slide. Dr. Abbas, please move to the next slide.
Okay.
You have control of the screen. You can move to the next slide.
Okay. I'm on slide 6 now.
Okay, so just use your arrow to move to the next slide.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm on slide 6 now, just to confirm we are on the same slide.
Okay, it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed.
Okay, sorry. Okay, let me just do it again. So okay, are we on slide 6 now?
Okay, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me just briefly go over this and then move to the next slide. So this is the existing arrangement which the network code tried to impose. So the first thing that the network code tried to make sure happens is gas is managed based on demand and supply. Every gas user should be able to know how much gas he or she requires for tomorrow, and you should be able to put a bid in for a shipper to transport that gas for you. So for you to use a gas tomorrow, you should be able to book that gas today. So when a shipper makes a booking through NGC or any other transporter, the booking process goes through, the nomination is taken, processed, and subsequently confirmed. That simply means before that process happens, everybody must make sure that from the supply point, transportation side, and delivery side are all intact with the necessary infrastructure to meet that requirement. So now moving to the next slide, we'll be able to see if you couldn't access gas through the normal network. Say, for example, I couldn't book my gas for today as a power generator. Now, what will happen to me? I have other options which I can go through the trading platform to get my gas supply, either over-counter or on-the-day commodity. The only limitation is I may likely buy gas more expensive today compared to if I buy the gas originally yesterday. Or I can buy the gas as early as 3 months, 6 months, or even a year ahead, just to make sure that I get a good price and a good deal. And that is how the general on-the-counter and on-the-day commodity market operate based on what you call the national balancing point. So from the supplier side, Because in Nigeria, the most important problem we do come across are situations related to gas shortage, gas vandalism, inability to get the gas to the user. So the network code comes up with three important pillars, which is network access, capacity allocation, and congestion management, as well as balancing. And these are the three cardinal points that help the network operator to be able to make sure that the gas has reached the customer no matter what. And that is what brings opportunity for new entrant to be able to make sure that the network has supplied the gas to the user. So moving on to the next slide, if we have to follow this scheme, if we have to get to the level we have to get to in terms of building our industry using natural gas or any other form of gas, how do we go about it? There are fundamental rules we have to follow. And one of them is making sure that we build capacity of the shippers, the suppliers, the operators, and the regulators. Everybody needs to understand what has to be done, what is going to happen tomorrow, and what is going to happen in the next few weeks, days, as well as years ahead. So that is important. The second aspect is we have to ensure that we empower our regulatory bodies to do their job, because in the actual gas marketing business, there are issues related to non-compliance. If the regulator is not powerful enough, there will be a lot of issues related to enforcement that require to be done and issues of transparency. And that is really why we have to empower the regulators to do that. Then they should be able to create a competition, and creating a competition enabling ground for everybody to perform wonderfully in the market. We then regulate the price to make sure that even a common man domestically can access gas, even somebody having a restaurant can access gas, and somebody generating power can access gas. And then we end up with setting the market rule as well as protecting the customers. All these are entirely a different chunk of 3 to 5 days discussion, each of these steps. So, but we have a limited time, so we have to just take it through what we can do at this age. So looking at the future, the energy matrix for currently in Nigeria is having to generate power separately and having to supply gas separately. In the future, that mix has to change. We are expecting renewables to come in. We are expecting wind, solar, and every other renewable source to come in. But the only issue is we have to get the network code incentivize those schemes and mini grids, because at the moment they are not economically viable. And unless we have support of that framework, then we may not be able to integrate them. So that is the target. We have to have an energy mix that has completely integrated energy matrix between gas, electricity, as well as renewables. Now, the last aspect are just the concluding remarks, which the gas supply is going to help us through the network code to be able to solve the gas price parity. And the gas price parity is our major issue that brings about subsidy, that brings about export compared to domestic gas obligation. The second issue is we have the potential to become a gas-based economy, just like Australia, Qatar, and every other country, but we really have a big work to do. Network code will be able to incentivize the use of renewables grid because it will make them cheaper, and they will be able to have economic of scale. And the PIB need to empower regulators to have independence so that they can do their job in the way they are expected to. And then the electricity network code is needed to create synergy for the gas network code. And lastly, the human capital is definitely important because we really need to understand where we are heading to. Thank you very much, everyone. I know I have just gotten a bit higher than my expected time, but thank you very much for joining. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Apolagi.
All right, thank you, Dr. Abbas. I want to apologize to our listeners for the technical glitches that we've been having. We'll make sure that this is minimized for the next few presentations. Dr. Abbas, your presentation raised a whole lot of questions. I'm sure you will be addressing those questions toward the end after all of the presentations. We'll now very quickly move to the next presenter, who is Kolawole Akinboye, the Vice President of Rensource Energy, who would now talk to us about deployment of mini-grids as a tool to achieve Vision 30-30-30 in alignment with SDG 7. Kola, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you have control of your screen. And please ensure that the screen moves along with your presentation so our listeners can keep up with you.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Not a problem. You're welcome. Okay, all right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kolawole Akinboye, and I'm talking about the deployment of mini-grids to achieve Vision 30-30-30, which in turn helps us achieve Sustainable Development Goal 7. Now, first of all, let's talk about the National Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Policy targets. Now, before now, around 2015, the NREEP targets were set, and they were set around 2030, in which Nigeria looked at how it was supposed to grow over the next couple of decades and decided that with the kind of growth the country was expecting, we should be generating about 40 gigawatts of electricity by the year 2030. Now that has been revised a little bit. Right now, the target is the Vision 30-30-30 target is for Nigeria to generate 30 gigawatts of electricity by the year 2030, and for 30% of that generation to be renewable. Now, renewable energy in this target refers to hydropower, biomass, solar, wind, geothermal, wave, and tidal energy, all to be utilized in vast scale. Now, in Nigeria, our renewable energy resources, according to the policy document, are estimated at over 68 gigawatts, which is 5 times what our current power output is. Our current power output is still about 4 to 5 gigawatts. So the Minister for Power, the former Minister for Power, stated, of course, that for the present generation and our power output, about 85% of it is gas-fired and 15% is hydro. So we are presently at 15% level of renewables in our present power mix. Now, so to achieve this target, there is a lot to do. So let's look at the scale of the problem as we have it now. Now, our power need in Nigeria is huge, of course. From studies done by Sustainable Energy for All, Rocky Mountain Institute, and a few other bodies, and also within the policy document the government released, there are about 60% of the Nigerian population that do not have access to grid-connected electricity. And of the 40% that have access, about 72% of them reside in urban areas and only 28% in rural areas. And out of that 16.4 million households, only about 4.6 million are connected to the electricity grid. For us to achieve the Vision 30-30-30, there needs to be about 50 billion naira investment in connecting people to power over the next decade. And also up to about 500,000 rural households need to be added to have access to energy within that time. They need to be added on a yearly basis. So renewable energy needs to supply about 8 gigawatts of grid power generation for us to actually achieve Vision 30-30-30. It sounds like a very, very tall order, and of course it is. Now, how do we achieve viable mini-grids as the off-grid component, also with the on-grid component for achieving this 30% renewable addition to the mix? Of course, hydropower is a big part of it, or hydropower is going to do a lot, but it of course takes a lot of investment when you go hydro. We have Our hydropower potential in Nigeria is estimated at over 10 gigawatts. So hydro can do quite a bit. And we haven't done more than 15% of that hydro potential. But right now we're focusing a lot on mini grids and on what we can do with solar mini grids. So what are the key factors that help us to have viable mini grids in Nigeria and to be able to do up to 1,000 mini grids on a yearly basis so that we can meet the targets that we have set for ourselves as a country? Now, the first thing is we need to build a mini grid, you need to select an economically viable location. You need to be able to, for example, find a community that has enough demand for you to be able to build a project around. And most times you need to find like what we call anchor users that have productive use cases for which you can then use to anchor your demand within that community. That's the first thing, selecting an economically viable location. The second thing is having a well-planned and proper ownership structure for your mini grid. You need to be sure of how the ownership structure is going to be. Are you going to create a special purpose vehicle to power that community? Are you going to have some community ownership within the mini grid? Are you going to have investors owning part of it? How is the equity debt structure going to be like? You need to plan it properly from the beginning. The next thing is you need to prioritize community development and involvement in your project development phase. That means you need to develop your relationship with the community, even as you are developing the project. As you are coming in to do preliminary studies to understand what the community needs, you need to involve the community closely with it, because without the community's buy-in and the community's support, mini grids basically do not succeed. And that's been the experience of many mini grid companies that have done successful mini grids in Nigeria. And even after the deployment of the mini grid, a key factor is continuous community engagement. They need to be engaged. They need to understand the metering. They need to understand the billing. They need to understand how the mini grid is being operated. And they need to have an ownership within the community for the success of that mini grid. Next key factor is stimulating energy demand. A lot of times within a new mini grid, or when a mini grid comes into a community, people need to change the way they use energy. So some people would need to buy new appliances that are more energy efficient, so that they can make better use of the energy the mini grid is supplying. And to help, there might be some planning within your mini grid plan to have provision for appliance financing for these people, so that the uptake for the energy is high. And then you also need to find a key factor to incentivize the productive use of energy, because those are the anchor customers upon which all other customers would tie into. And of course, in Nigeria, we have some of the best regulation for mini grids in the developing world. So you need to rely on the existing regulatory support. You need to understand regulatory support, understand what the regulations are around mini grids. There's a NEC mini grid document. There's the rural electrification plan, and a lot of things that actually you need to understand, that you need to ride upon to have a successful mini grid. Then you should also add value-added services to your mini grid. Find a way to not just sell energy, but sell anything else that you can use to add value to the customers within that mini grid to increase the revenue from the mini grid. And also, finally, major key factor is external funding and incentives. Majorly for mini grids, there is the tariffs are, let's say, between 120 naira per kilowatt hour to about 300 naira per kilowatt hour from the studies done by the Rocky Mountain Institute. But even when charging within that space, companies find it difficult to be profitable within the mini grid space. And there's a lot of funding that has come in. There is a national electrification project that is being funded by the African Development Bank and the Nigerian government. There's the mini grid acceleration scheme. There's the interconnected mini grid acceleration scheme. There's the performance-based grants that is being done by the Rural Electrification Agency. There's a lot of external funding that is coming in that is actually meant to accelerate these mini grids, because if we're going to be connecting 500,000 households through off-grid power supply, there needs to be this kind of support so that it can be accelerated. There can't be 4 or 5 companies doing mini grids. There have to be 30, 40, 50 companies doing 3, 4, 5 mini grids a year for us to achieve what we want to with Vision 30-30-30. Now, these are two examples of traditional mini grids today. The sizes for the mini grids that we do or that we've done so far in Nigeria across what different companies have done is usually around 16 kilowatts and 100 kilowatts. Each mini grid is trying to serve between 1,000 to 5,000 customers and 5,000 people. So all the metering, all the capex is done by these companies, and then they are able to make their money over a period of time. There is a value chain for mini grid projects. You need to, first of all, create a pipeline. You need to go to different communities, different places to have multiple opportunities. And then when you engage with the communities, you gather data, and then you can then narrow down those possibilities into the ones you would start with, or the ones that are more viable for you. Then you need to then do your financial analysis to be sure of the ones you're gonna do. Then you're gonna design and plan the project. Now, a key part of a successful mini grid project is the control of the costs. Costs have to be controlled in as much as you want to have quality material used in the construction of the mini grid. You have to ensure that the costs are manageable. So you must work with your procurement to ensure that it's perfectly done. And then you must work with your project financing to find the cheapest sources of capital, and also leverage upon all the World Bank funds and the REAN projects and all of that to help your project financing. Of course, you need to fix your licenses and permits so that you don't run into problems there. And in your design, you need to think of your demand stimulation. You don't want to go into a mini grid, build capacity, and then you don't have the demand, the offtake for the capacity you have built. Now, in execution, a big part of execution is fixing your supply chain. The materials you would buy, you need to ensure that your supply chain is properly planned. What needs to come in from China, as COVID-19 has taught us, supply chain is the lifeblood of businesses. If you do not plan your supply chain well, you would have things stuck on the high seas while you are supposed to be working on a site. So you need to plan what needs to come in from outside Nigeria, needs to be planned, the clearing needs to be planned, the assumptions need to be clear so you can have a proper project plan and that you'll be executing according to that project plan. Your system installation and your project management has to be top-notch because you have to do a quality installation according to international standards, because then you'll be able to, as a mini grid company, attract foreign capital. You don't want to do a shoddy job because then there won't be lasting influence within your mini grid and things will just start getting damaged, poor quality, and then you just lose your investors. Your commissioning, you have to really focus on quality. You have to do your quality checks. You have to ensure that your inspection is done according to international standards. Of course, I keep saying that it's really, really important. And while commissioning, your community engagement is important. The community has to understand exactly what is happening. They need to understand the tariffs that you are agreeing with them on. Of course, for some of these funding programs that the REAN does, like the IMAS and the mini grid acceleration scheme, you have to then, of course, negotiate according to MITO tariffs. And then your operations have to be properly done. You have to choose the right meters. You have to build properly, and then you have to ensure you collect, maybe using the local community to accelerate your collections. Focus on asset management is key. You need to manage your assets so that they last through their lifetime and they are maintained properly. And finally, decommissioning, which of course should come many, many years down the line when you are either integrating with the national grid and negotiating with the distribution companies, or disassembling your mini grid and moving on. And there's community engagement all through that process. And with that, I would say following the steps, pursuing multiple mini grids, doing many projects, having planning your structure properly and deploying accordingly is what we need. And many companies doing that simultaneously across Nigeria is the only way we can achieve Vision 30-30-30. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kola, for that wonderful presentation. The contrast that I've observed between the first presentation and this presentation in trying to resolve our energy challenges is in the first presentation, we had the presenter propose private sector participation as one of the ways to resolve the challenges with gas supply to the power companies. And here we have private sector participation that is allowed, but not enough of it in terms of the challenges we have in reaching our goal, which is a very daunting task, the goal of generating 30 gigawatts of electricity by the year 2030. I'm sure all of our listeners will be asking those questions when we get to the point of questions. We have two more presenters. Our next presenter is Mr. Segun Adaju, who is the president of Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria, and he will be talking about the role of distributed renewable energy in the future of energy. Mr. Adaju, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Do you have access to your slides ready? Are you able to show your slides? Or do you want us to take control of that?
Okay, let me try and share my slide. Let me know if you can see.
Okay, you need to go to presentation mode. We can see your slides.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll be speaking
you need to put your slides, sorry, you need to put your slides in presentation mode.
Right, I've clicked it. I think, yeah.
It still hasn't changed. Okay, now it is.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so
all right.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I will quickly just take a dive into the role of distributed renewable energy in Nigeria's future energy needs. A brief about the association, REAN, Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. We started in 2016, late 2016. We are the umbrella body of associations in Nigeria, comprising of private sector developers around 5 technologies: solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, and small hydro. Interestingly, our vision is 30-30-40. That is, we believe that renewable energy will make up to 40% of the energy mix by year 2030. That's ahead of the national target. So quickly, I'll move to the current energy situation. Thanks to the first 2 speakers, Dr. Abubakar and my friend and colleague in the industry, Kolawole. The current situation of Nigeria's energy need shows clearly that our need is higher than what we can generate. So that means demand is a lot higher than supply. By Pricewaterhouse Cooper's analysis, I mean, less than 40%, less than half of Nigerian population have access to the grid. And from Kola's presentation, that's say about 40%. All right. We also see a fluctuation in between what is generated, even on daily basis, in terms of outages and the demand. Installed capacity about 13 gigawatts. Distribution is about 7.5. The estimated demand, and it's subject to the school of thought where you're coming from. Some say between 20 gigawatts to 40 gigawatts. That's the current demand that Nigeria, has. The transmission grid, it covers just about 40% of the country, and a whole lot of money is spent annually on fueling generators. And so much is also lost, up to $1 trillion in terms of economic losses due to power outages in Nigeria. So when we talk about distributed energy, this is energy that is generated and used close to site. Okay, so unlike grid-tied energy that you have to generate, connect to the national grid, transmit, distribute, and with all its challenges, energy losses, energy theft, and a few issues. Distributed energy is that energy you generate on site and you consume very close to site. So that invariably means it includes mini grid that Kola has talked about extensively. So I'll focus my presentation on standalone. So for example, standalone as solar system, as an example. Now, still looking at the energy situation in Nigeria, and I make this argument most of the time that we already have a distributed energy model in Nigeria. Leapfrogging to distributed renewable energy will not be a challenge. Why do I say this? So over 23 million households in Nigeria, virtually most households have one form of generator or the other. About 17 SMEs, over 80–85% of these SMEs have their own generator or they share. And you have average of 8 hours of these generators running for average of 25 days in a month. Energy generated close to site and consumed. And for household, for example, different sizes from the popular I better pass my neighbor that we all Nigerians know, to large systems like 20 kilowatt generators. And you find household spending between 12,000 naira up to 300,000 naira on a monthly basis just to fuel these generators. By International Energy Agency's record, Nigeria accounts for about 75% of backup power generation from diesel in Africa. Huge. So the business model, the framework for distributed energy already exists. Now, talking about the energy gap, we've talked about the number of small gasoline generators. Let's talk about the big size generators, for example, diesel generators that telecoms use. World Bank estimates about 25,000 generators are powering away virtually every day at some cell sites in Nigeria. And that the energy that we generated, self-generation, using generators is almost 8 times, between 6 to 8 times of what the national grid generates. So we see figures of, say, between 8 gigawatt to 14 gigawatts of decentralized generators pounding away all over Nigeria. So what does the future have? And what is the role of distributed renewable energy? And I'll start this argument by saying, since we already have a distributed energy model, business model, if you can call it that, what I advocate is just a shift. So you already have the model that's running, powering, over 10,000 megawatts, almost 14,000 megawatts currently as I speak. So the strategy is to just displace these generators and replace with the cleaner technology from renewables, and then you continue running. The funding is already, when I say the economy is already proven. Although it's very expensive for households, small businesses, manufacturing outfits, but that's about the option that they have to remain in business. Okay, so the future that we'll be seeing, and that has already started, in addition to mini grids, will be solar home systems, maybe plug and play in very remote communities where you don't have the clusters that mini grids can take, where it's not economically viable to have, say, a mini grid and connect, say, 200 or 50 households, all right? We're going to be seeing small solar, for example, renewable energy technologies for productive use, for SMEs. Remember, we have about 70 million SMEs, most of which have one kind of generator or the other. So a simple displacement of that tiny generator from a barber shop, for example, using my own barber as a case study, and just replacing with solar power. The next day he continues with that same model, and then he has energy access. We're also going to be seeing households, individual households with rooftop solar or apartments. For example, there's a 10 block of apartments in Abuja, Guzape Hills precisely, that has been powered in the last 5 years by solar with some wind and a rooftop solar water heating system developed by one of the members of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. We're also going to be seeing commercial and industrial installations. And let me use solar as an example. So the picture you are seeing here is a facility somewhere in Oregon, Ikeja, Lagos, central Lagos, about 200 kilowatts rooftop solution, powering a company that sells generators. So, I mean, it's pretty very interesting. So a company selling generators is now adopting solar rooftop to complement their energy need, right? We also have, for example, gas filling stations going solar, putting solar panels on their rooftop right there at the station, and powering pumps and other facilities. A typical example is Total, very close to Sheraton in Lagos, that generates over 92,000 I think kilowatt hour every year. Okay, so another interesting development. A company selling diesel, now going solar. We're also going to be seeing health centers, the medical facilities, especially post-COVID-19, that the best way to power them would be to have their own standalone rooftop solar system. So the picture you're seeing here is for National Orthopedic Hospital, Igbobi, powered by one of the members of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria too, especially in this recent pandemic. So it's been seen that the quickest, the fastest, and actually proven, cheapest way to power a facility like National Orthopedic Hospital in Igbobi will be just to put solar on the rooftop, and within 1 week, probably, you're running on your own energy solution, okay? Instead of, rather than waiting for the long grid, generation, transmission, and, all the challenges. We're also going to see the agricultural sector, where distributed renewable energy will play a key role. So the picture you are seeing is a facility somewhere in Kwara State called Kayama, where a facility that offers grinding to rural farmers has gone solar with some battery backup. I think it's about 4.5 kilowatts, also developed by one of the members of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. We are already seeing telecommunication sites, knowing pretty very well that the fastest and cheapest way to power their cell sites will be distributed energy solution, combined probably with some battery backup and some diesel, generator on standby. Given the energy need, that times can get as high as 99.98%, power needs. Okay, so this is one of these facilities also done by a member of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. So for us at REAN, and my belief is of energy in Nigeria, we see a very strong component of distributed renewable energy. Of course, there will be other components, gas powered, large hydros, but renewable energy will form a substantial part of meeting the energy needs of Nigerians in the nearest future. Now, I hear this question most of the time. So why are we not having a fast uptake? So if this is cheaper, quicker, and easier to deploy, why the slow uptake? Okay, so the issue of funding is an example, and Akola mentioned that. So for example, a small business, an SME, do not have that initial capital outlay to buy solar. So there are business models now that offer lease to own, pay as you go, energy as a service, with a strong interest of financial institutions. And over the years, we'll definitely see more of these solutions are being deployed. So we see a very strong input of distributed renewable energy in the energy space in Nigeria. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Segun Adaju, for that compelling presentation that focuses on the need to shift from the existing distribution or distributed energy framework to distributed renewable energy. We'll now go to the last presentation. There are a lot of questions from our listeners. We'll take the last presentation very quickly from Dr. Joy Ogaji, who is the Executive Secretary of the Association of Power Generating Companies of Nigeria. And I think we will show her slides. If my colleague is listening, can you please go ahead and project Dr. Ogaji's slides? Dr. Ogaji, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for having me. Once more, my name is Dr. Joy Ogaji. I'm the Executive Secretary, Association of Power Generation Companies. The association represents all power generating companies, including the renewable energy. We are just waiting for them. They are our junior brothers, and after they are finished playing on the field, I guess they will join us in the room. We're in the boardroom waiting for them. Anyway, as necessary to achieve this laudable vision, 30-30, please just go straight to the first slide, please. I'm just making an opening remark. Yeah, as necessary to achieve this laudable vision 30-30 goal, it is very, very critical that we have a functional and an efficient regulatory regime. I've listened to the first speaker, the second speaker, the third speaker. You can, if you've been listening intently, you could draw a very good line or thread that ties to each one of them. The first speaker spoke about gas, how the challenges can be solved, or how we can come up with more creative solutions to the gas to power challenges. And the second speaker spoke about mini grids, which is also critical in order for us to meet all the off-grid and yet to supplied areas, especially the rural areas. And the third speaker has spoken about the need for us to have a very good energy mix, focusing on renewable as well, in addition to all other existing distributed energy solutions. I want to speak on the importance or the role of regulation in the power sector. And I want to speak from the standpoint of looking at regulation. Is it an enabler or an inhibitor? And now, in order for a regulation to become an enabler, it is important that we focus on regulation, because in my view, regulation is the bedrock upon which all the speakers, whatever they are proposed, will be based on. It is like the bedrock or the ground norm upon which whether gas to power will be efficient, whether the mini grid operators will be able to operate efficiently, whether the renewable energy and all the equipment will come in and they'll be able to operate efficiently. All is hinged on the regulator. And it was in recognition of this that when the drafters of the EPSRA, which is Electric Sector Power Reform Act of 2005, when they drafted it, before that was passed into law, the first policy that came in was the National Electric Power Policy of 2001, which earmarked for the need for a very strong and independent regulator. And if you look at Section 31 of the EPSRA, it mandated for the creation of an efficient regulatory regime. Section 32 went forward to outline the functions of that regulatory or the commissioners. And it went forward to, in Section 34, state how they should be chosen in terms of the appointment criteria for commissioners in the NEC, how they should be appointed. Now, before I go to the second slide, I just had to give that opening remark just for us to see the role of regulation in this webinar. as it ties into every other speaker and all they have spoken about. Now, regulation is very, very imperative as it checkmates private behavior. And it's also important in order to bring about efficient and sustainable investment in a private sector. Regulation serves the function of ensuring that price structures are followed, service is adequate, utilities are there to strict government safety standards. The imperative of an independent regulator in a highly politically influenced sector like us cannot be overemphasized. Regulatory agencies are set up to deal with problems such as market failures. I know a lot of listeners will argue that there is currently a market failure. And so many people have also argued that there is market failure being experienced by all market participants because there is lack of coordination and leadership in the sector. But these were all dealt with by FHEA. If you go to section 96 of FHEA allows NEC to do everything and anything to ensure that the power sector works efficiently. The question that any other person, I think my next slide please, the question any other person will want to ask is, if the government or the policymakers have created a very strong and functional regulatory body as NEC and has empowered it so much so, because if you read section 96, especially, section 96 empowers NEC so much, it gives NEC the latitude to make regulation prescribing all matters. As lawyers, if we're told to interpret that section, NEC can actually declare somebody a male, a female, if that can make the power sector work efficiently. So if NEC has been given such latitude and the Act has imbued the Commission with the full complement of regulatory power of a quasi-judicial and legislative nature, the question the listeners may want to ask is, why then are we not having a very strong and functional regulatory regime in the power sector? I think that question may be asked much later, because I believe that NEC has all it takes to perform efficiently and to ensure that the power sector works efficiently as well. As has been highlighted by the second speaker as well as the third speaker, the power sector is currently going through a lot of challenges. In order for us to ensure that these challenges do not continue up to and hamper our vision 30-30-30, I think there is need for us to ensure that there is regulatory independence and certainty. And this also has been clearly outlined by both the policy documents, which is NEP 2001, and the FHEA Act. It made provision for the following. It said an independent regulatory commission will clearly define regulatory functions and objects backed by law. NEC has all of this. Clear process of appointment and removal of commissioners and chairman of the commission outside of the normal civil service appointments. And also, in order to ensure independence and certainty of the regulation or regulatory regime, the Act ensured the isolation of the Commission from civil service rules, including its reporting structures, compensation structure, and retirement benefits of its commissioners and staff. The Act also gave the Commission autonomous funding for the Commission with direct appropriation by the National Assembly, outside of appropriation to the Ministry of Power. The regulator's independence is expected, amongst others, in the following: in independence of financial and employment inducement. Decision-making should be independent of arguments that are unverifiable or legally irrelevant, and such should be independent of adjectives, adverbs, and phrases aimed more at emotions than intellect. So if you ask me, and we come back to the question again, is the existing regulatory regime an enabler or a inhibitor The NESI, in my conclusion, would say it's not lacking regulation or policies. Before my presentation, I've gone to NEC website, and anybody listening can actually quickly open NEC website, and you can see that we are not lacking regulation. From 2005 till now, NEC has issued so many regulations on many areas. What it is lacking is impactful and positive change-oriented regulations. Arguably, this can be argued by listeners and others. However, this is my opinion, that we are not lacking regulations and policies to move the power sector forward. Rather, we are lacking in impactful and positive change-oriented regulations. We are lacking effective monitoring and evaluation and implementation. There are so many regulations, even in the renewable space. Before my current role, I was part of the Presidential Task Force. And I recall one of our first trips in 2013/14, we went to South Africa to go and understudy the South African Renewable Energy Agency and to come up with the first renewable agency, renewable policy that was passed by NEC. So we have enough laws, orders, codes, regulations that can regulate and that can assist us to move to our vision 30-30-30 with renewable energy forming 30% of our energy mix. But I have a problem with implementation plan. I have a problem, and I'm also worried that without the same coordination and leadership that we lacked, that led us to slagging or stagnating in meeting our 40,000 megawatts in 20,000 in this year, which has now made us to review it to 2030. I believe that if we don't put together a benchmarkable implementation plan that we can benchmark on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannually, or annually to see where we are. And this implementation plan should include the performance of the various market participants and how we are all working in synergy to achieving our vision 30-30-30. I think I will end here. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ogaji. We need to move very quickly because of our time. We'll now go into the Q&A session, and I'd like to inform our listeners that you can ask your questions by using the Q&A icon on the bottom of your screen. There are so many questions already. We would only take questions from the Q&A button. So we'll quickly go to that now, and I'll take the first question. It's from Hamza. Hamza asks, who oversees the gas aggregation process? And that goes to Dr. Abbas. Very quickly, please. Let's just answer our questions very quickly for the sake of time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Afolabi and Hamza. The aggregation process under the current network code is not really very clear. However, the Ministry of Petroleum Resources has a gas division which has formed a gas aggregation company of Nigeria. So under the current climate, it's not very clear how the aggregation process will be done, because in different countries, we do have aggregation coming from the transporter instead of a regulator, but there are still flexibility in that.
Okay. Next question is also for you, Dr. Abbas, and it says, Dr. Abbas said that with oil price at $30, gas price should be between $3 to $6 MMBTU. Does this mean that dome gas price in Nigeria, which is currently 2.5 per MMBTU, is below market price? And then the second one, LNG price is currently $1.25 per MMBTU, and this is supposed to be at parity with gas for power. How do you explain this low cost of LNG vis-a-vis the cost of gas to power?
thank again Mr. Afalabi and Stephen. Yeah, confirm the price of natural gas being sold at $2.5 per million BTU is really not the market price, because in Nigeria, we normally come up with what you call an aggregate price. So it's somehow subsidized, because the current market price we are seeing is supposed to be something between above 3. At some point, it can even get up to $5 per million BTU. So there are subsidies there, yes. The second question related to LNG. If we understand, the federal government in Nigeria try to prioritize power generation. And for that, everything that is going towards power generation, government try to incentivize the companies for them to really support gas supply to power. However, that window creates an opportunity where there are issues with getting the money of which the gas has been supplied to power. And for that reason, there is then a case where the IOCs try to move toward export instead of import. So despite the subsidy, and to some extent, this subsidy is the problem to the power sector, because the IOCs felt it's far better to sell it outside than to bring it to the power sector, because I'm not making money.
Okay, the next question for Kola, Samuel Babalola asks and says, I didn't hear much about demand assessment, which to me is a vital part of a mini-grid project. Most mini-grid project developers struggle with low capacity utilization, having deployed or installed their projects already, and they always claim they did a good demand assessment. What would you advise?
All right. For demand assessment for mini-grids, there's always an assumption when one enters a community that probably never had access to the grid or has never used the grid before. And the assumption is always that once you have access to energy, you'll be so excited that you would always want to have that energy, and then you would increase at a particular level of use. Of course, that assumption has been shown to be wrong in some cases, and that is why a lot of mini-grid developers now work on their demand assessment around anchor customers, the ones that would need the energy for productive use, and not the ones that live in the households, that there will be an assumption for how much lighting and heating and entertainment use they would use the energy for. And as developers are working on these mini grids, they are getting better at demand assessment, because what happens in Nigeria is a very peculiar situation. It's one of the few countries where there are a lot of people that have never had access to the grid, and there is no model that works best for Nigeria, but from what people are learning, and that's just the situation.
Okay, thank you, Kola. The next question is for Mr. Adaju, and it says, what is the role of REAN in ensuring and enforcing availability of quality materials and systems installations?
Okay, thank you. So REAN, we have about 4 working groups. One of them is around standards and quality. So we promote, we encourage our members to adopt, international global certification, for example, the IEC, the Lighting Global Certification for their products. We also, engaging with the relevant stakeholders, and here I must mention the Standard Organization of Nigeria, to see how standards can be formally, adopted, and also enforcement is carried out. Most of the mini grids that has been deployed under the Rural Electrification Agency has been done by mainly members of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. So we are setting up, for example, we're having a hotline where clients, and we're hoping there's a project we're trying to develop and get a funder where we engage even as high as up to the Consumer Protection Council, so that if a customer gets served
Hello?
Council to engage on the core standards that has been deployed. But in the long run, it is the Standard Organization of Nigeria that holds that power to regulate standards. They were in very close engagement to ensure that it is adopted officially like it's done in so many other countries.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask my colleague David, who's working behind the scenes, if we're able to extend this for like 5 more minutes to take a couple of more questions. David, can you please let me know if we have 5 more minutes, because I know our time is.
Sure, we can do 5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go on to our next question. This goes to Mr. Kola and Mr. Adaju, and it says, what is the difference between mini grids and distributed renewable energy? Evidently, the listener is not quite clear on the difference between the two. Mr. Adaju, do you want to speak to that very quickly?
Okay, so thank you. I mean, mini grid is another form of distributed renewable energy. I mean, like I mentioned in my opening comments, so mini grids are developed and consumed and used close to site within a community. So you have a power plant, let me use that word, and then you have its own distribution network within that community. Of course, there are some mini grids also that are beginning that you can connect to the grid, for example, the integrated mini grid system. But basically, mini grids are other forms of distributed energy generation. And Kola could also make some comments here. Yes,
Kola, do you want to add to that?
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Adaju. So what happens right here is in many countries, there is centralized distribution, which means we generate energy from a central location and we distribute across the country. Now, Nigeria is aiming to be the first country that has its main source of energy from distributed power plants, which means a power plant that is close to the user. There is no transmission from a faraway place, because we've seen that we have the whole problem of the generation and the transmission network, and then we are pushing distribution that way. Now, building mini grids is a sort of distributed energy, bringing the generation station as close to the customer as possible. And that's the whole plan for taking Nigeria into 2030, distributed energy.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to have Dr. Ogaji attempt this question if she can, and then Dr. Abbas will also follow up and answer on this. And this is a question from Damilari, and it says, why don't we have many players in the gas transportation industry apart from NGC, Shell, and Axela?
I think Dr. Abbas has the expertise to answer that question.
Okay, Dr. Abbas, do you want to take that?
Thank you, Dr. Joy, for your kindness. What happened in terms of access to the transportation network or participation as a transporter? With the commencement of the launch of the Nigerian Gas Transportation Network Code, now DPR is expected to be a licensed body that is going to give transportation license, supplier license, trader license. Now, under this current scheme, we are expecting what we call liberalization process to take place. Bearing in mind that countries like US, UK, Singapore, South Korea takes almost 10 to 20 years to get their gas market developed. So it's not going to be a work for tomorrow or next year, in all honesty. But what is expected is we are expecting DPR to start looking at the activities of NGC, and where NGC has a long-term contract of large volume of gas supply, we are expecting the regulator to start reducing that contract volume by allowing other entrant into the market to take opportunity. And when that happens, then we can now see new entrant, possibly private body individuals and companies coming up to take a transporter license to be able to build their own pipelines. We can see how government has to go through a lot of process to raise money for AKK pipeline, which in reality, under the network code, a private company can come and develop that entire network on their own, on the fact that they will be able to supply gas to a lot of customers. So this is the expectation, but it is expected to take some time for us to get where we are expected to be.
Okay, I have this question for Dr. Ogaji. It's from Umar. It says, good evening, Dr. Ogaji. Our distribution system is majorly handled by the private sector. Can't we go further in the privatization that is at the local community level?
I don't really understand the question. The person asking the question is trying to ask. Is it that power should?
I think they're wondering if the regulation allows further privatization at the local community level, because they've heard the distributed renewable energy solutions to the local community level. I think this is from the perspective of the regulations. Does it allow that?
If I may come in, Dr. Joy, if you are happy, I can.
Yes, if you check the Constitution, actually electricity in the Constitution is in the concurrent list, which means it can be both at the federal and at the state level. And if he's talking about local level, local and states, in most states of Nigeria are now local government and states are like one now, operating as one, except there has been a clear delineation recently. So if he's looking at power, in terms of generation and distribution operated at the local level, that is up to the state level, I would say that is allowed, because NEC regulation has not restricted the states or local government from coming into or partaking in the power sector. If you look at Port Harcourt Disco, for example, the consortium that bought Port Harcourt Disco was 4Power, and the 4Power was made up of 4 states: Akwa Ibom, Calabar, Bayelsa State, and Rivers State. So this is state participation, and I don't know if this is what the listener or the participant is trying to ask. I think I would say a yes to it, and there is no regulation that is restricting local government or state government from partaking. Although the restriction is in the area of them making regulation. At the moment, those regulations are strictly for NEC, which is the federal agency. Maybe if he's talking about making laws or making regulations for such operations, then that is not allowed by ESRA. So, but there is also the franchising regulation that allows local participants to partake in the power sector. So we do not really need further privatization for local entities or local governments to partake, or area councils to participate.
Okay, thank you very much for your participation. I'd like to thank all of our listeners and mention that the recording of the webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. You will be getting the notification through your emails. And in closing, because our time is far spent, we've done a few minutes beyond the time we estimated it would take. The topics that we have are quite broad, and it is impossible to exhaust and address all of the issues in the short time that we have. So I want to thank our panelists who have graciously shared their thoughts on the subject matter. And I hope we've all learned one or two things from the discussions. We will continue the discussions online through our social media handles. And our next webinar will be on subject matters that may have come up during these conversations, and we will inform you when that will be. And thank you to all of our listeners who have engaged us in this webinar. Watch out for more information by following our social media handles on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. That's at etc_connect, and on LinkedIn is at etc-ng. Our website is www.etc.ng, pardon me. And all of our panelists also had their social media handles on their presentations. All of that will be available on our on the YouTube channel at the recording. And we will attend to all the other questions that we were not able to attend to during the webinar. Thank you all very much, and goodbye.